Chicago had a theory about itself. It believed, with the particular arrogance of great Midwestern cities, that it had seen everything. It had survived the fire of 1871, the gangsters of the 20s, the riots and the riots after the riots, the relentless Arctic winters that sent the wind howling between its towers like something alive and resentful. It had been called the Second City, the city of big shoulders, the city that works, and it had worn each name like a badge earned through suffering. Chicago knew, in its old bones of limestone and steel, that it could endure. But the summer of 2024 was testing that theory in ways that felt almost personal. By the third week of July, the National Weather Service had stopped issuing ordinary heat advisories and moved into a register that felt almost theological. Extreme heat emergency. Dangerous and life-threatening conditions. Do not go outside unless absolutely necessary. The lake, which in any other summer would have offered at least the illusion of relief, sat flat and dense under a white sky, more mirror than water, throwing the heat back at the city instead of absorbing it. The asphalt on Michigan Avenue had developed a faint, almost imperceptible softness underfoot, as if the city's skeleton were slowly beginning to yield. Dogs refused to walk. Birds sat stunned on fire escapes, beaks open. The fountains in Millennium Park were overwhelmed with children and adults alike. The usual decorum of the city dissolved entirely by something more primal and immediate than dignity. The heat index on Monday, July 22nd, reached 112 degrees Fahrenheit. At 18 degrees Celsius, 64.4 Fahrenheit, to be precise. The 41st floor of Sterling Tower felt like a different planet. It was always exactly 18 degrees in Sloane Sterling's office. Not 17, which produced a faint, almost subconscious discomfort in the muscles of the forearms. Not 19, which introduced the beginning of lassitude, a micro-softening of focus that accumulated over hours into something measurable and unacceptable. 18 degrees was the number that a 2019 study published in the Journal of Environmental Psychology had identified as optimal for complex cognitive performance in individuals with high baseline cortisol, the number that Sloane had instructed her facilities manager, Gerald Wen, to maintain with the same unwavering consistency with which she maintained everything else in her professional life. Gerald had learned within his first week of employment that approximately 18 degrees was not the assignment. The office itself was a study in deliberate restraint. 40 feet of floor-to-ceiling glass on the north and east faces looked out over the river and the lake, and, on clear days, into the blue abstraction of a horizon that seemed to promise more continent. The glass was triple-paned, UV filtering, coated with a proprietary film that reduced glare by 94% without perceptibly dimming the quality of the light. A distinction that mattered to Sloane because she had learned, again from literature she had actually read rather than delegated, that certain wavelengths of natural light had statistically significant effects on executive function, and she was not interested in artificially degrading her own cognition to satisfy an aesthetic preference for drama. The furniture was pale, bone-white upholstery, desk surfaces in a matte white ash that looked like something scraped clean, and the floors were a polished white concrete that caught the northern light and distributed it evenly without reflection. There were no plants. There were no photographs. There were no objects on any surface that did not have a specific justifiable function. What there were, instead, were screens. 7 of them, arranged in a curved array across the eastern wall, each displaying a different data stream. Global equity markets, the proprietary usage analytics for Sterling AI's 3 active products, a live feed from the server room 17 floors below, a news aggregator filtered by 47 keywords she had personally specified, the internal project management dashboard for the company's upcoming product launch, a visualization of real-time API call volume rendered as a kind of luminous topographic map, and, on the 7th and smallest screen, set slightly apart from the others, a scrolling display of the alerts generated by Area, Sterling AI's flagship product, which Sloane monitored personally regardless of the hour. The screens gave the office its only color: the cool blue of financial data, the amber of analytics, the occasional red of an alert that required human judgment. In the white silence of the room, they pulsed like a nervous system, like something alive behind glass. Sloane Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling window with her back to all of it, holding a cup of coffee she had not yet drunk. She was 34 years old, though almost no one who met her for the first time correctly estimated her age in either direction. There was something about her that resisted easy temporal classification, a quality of composure so complete that it seemed less like youth or maturity than like a category of its own, outside chronology. She was tall, 5'10", and carried herself with the particular erect precision of someone who had spent years ensuring that her physical bearing communicated exactly what she intended it to communicate: authority, containment, and a subtle but unmistakable message that the space she occupied was hers by something more than circumstance. Her hair was dark, nearly black, with the faintest warm undertone that appeared only in direct sunlight, and she wore it pulled back from her face with a severity that was entirely deliberate. Not severity as a style choice, exactly, but severity as a kind of discipline, a daily recommitment to the principle that nothing about her appearance should demand attention that belonged to her work. The style exposed the clean geometry of her face, the sharp line of a jaw that people sometimes described, in profiles and business press, as forbidding, before correcting themselves to striking. Dark, slightly heavy brows, eyes of an unusual deep gray, the color of lake water in November, that had a quality of attention so focused it often made the people across from her feel, disconcertingly, that they were being accurately read. She was wearing, today as most days, a suit. This particular one was a medium charcoal gray, single-breasted, cut close enough to confirm the lines of her frame without commenting on them. The shirt beneath it was white. The tie, she was one of the few women in Chicago finance who still wore them, and she had learned to use this as a kind of low-grade psychological instrument, was a precise, understated stripe of charcoal and slate. On her wrist, a watch that she had bought the year Sterling AI cleared its first 100 million in revenue. A Vacheron Constantin perpetual calendar in brushed steel, chosen specifically because it did not look expensive to people who did not know what they were looking at. She was looking at the city, or rather, since the glass was doing its job of managing glare, and the sky was doing its job of being uniformly, oppressively white. She was looking at the place where the city ought to have been visible in its full detail, and instead, seeing only the fact of it. The dark verticals of towers softened by heat haze into something almost impressionistic. The pewter gleam of the river far below. And above everything, the peculiar quality of light that arrived with a heat emergency, which was less like light than like pressure, like the sky pressing down on a city it had decided to hold accountable for something. She knew it was 112 degrees out there. She knew this the way she knew most things about the physical world, as data, as a number that corresponded to a category of conditions she had read about and filed appropriately. She did not know it the way the people she could see from her window, small as insects, moving with the deliberate, reluctant economy of bodies under siege, knew it. She had been inside since 7:15 this morning. She would be inside until this evening, when her driver would bring the car to the underground garage and she would travel the 40 blocks to her apartment in climate-controlled continuity, moving from one managed environment to the next like a fish in an elaborate tank system, each compartment calibrated to the same precise and optimized temperature. This was, she had long ago decided, an acceptable and in fact rational arrangement. What she had not decided, or rather, what she had considered and then declined to examine too closely, was whether acceptable and rational constituted anything like a complete description of a life. She drank the coffee. It had gone slightly cool, which was fine. Temperature in beverages was not a category she had strong preferences about, a fact that had occasionally surprised people who expected the precision she applied to her environment to extend to more personal domains. Coffee was fuel. It could be 140 degrees or 68 degrees, and its function remained the same: She found the idea of having emotional responses to beverage temperature slightly exhausting, in the way she found most emotional responses to sensory stimuli slightly exhausting. Not because she was incapable of them, but because they required management, and management required energy, and energy was, at the end of every day, a finite resource. Her phone, face up on the desk, lit with a calendar reminder. 10:45 a.m. Depart for Hargreave and Liu. Garage level B2. 11:30 a.m. Quarterly review, Hargreave and Liu offices. She turned from the window. The thing about Sloane Sterling that most profiles, and there had been many profiles, in Forbes and Wired and Fast Company, and the Tribune and once, memorably, in a New Yorker piece that had coined the phrase algorithmic aristocracy in reference to her professional philosophy, failed to fully capture was the degree to which her efficiency was not performance. It was not a brand. It was not a discipline she had developed to compensate for some underlying chaos. It was, as nearly as she could identify, simply the natural architecture of her mind, the way she actually moved through the world when left to her own preferences, which was always toward reduction, toward the elimination of variables that generated noise without generating signal, toward the shortest path between the point of a decision and its execution. She had grown up in a family that experienced the world differently. Her mother, a ceramicist from Vermont who had followed a man, and then left the man, to Chicago in the early 90s, had lived in a state of permanent expressive overflow. Her studio always in a condition of gloriously productive disorder, her emotional life operatic and fully externalized, her love for her daughter enormous and demonstrative and sometimes, to young Sloane, slightly difficult to parse. Her father, who had stayed in their lives as a friendly but satellite presence, was a jazz musician whose relationship with time was more suggestion than contract. Her younger brother Marcus was a landscape architect with a gift for beautiful mess and a social calendar that seemed to run on a different physics than calendar software could adequately capture. Sloane had loved them, had always loved them, with a sincerity and a steadiness that she suspected sometimes looked, from the outside, like something cooler than love. She had been their quiet one, the one who kept track of appointments and remembered which bills needed paying, who drove them to the airport with time to spare and never lost her passport and sat in the comfortable center of their familial warmth without necessarily, quite, dissolving into it. By the time she was 12, she had identified this quality in herself, not as a deficiency, but as a kind of gift, and she had begun cultivating it deliberately, reading voraciously, organizing obsessively, developing an early and thorough addiction to the satisfaction of a problem correctly solved. She had gone to Northwestern on a full scholarship, graduated summa, done a master's in computer science at MIT, where she had written a thesis on neural network optimization that her advisor had described as almost disturbingly rigorous, and then spent 4 years at a major consulting firm, learning how large organizations failed and why before quitting at 27 with a business plan. A co-founder, Marcus Chen, now her COO, who was her oldest friend, and the only person alive she would describe as genuinely knowing her, and the particular ferocious confidence of someone who has spent years understanding a system and is now ready to do it better. Sterling AI had been founded 7 years ago. Its flagship product, ARIA, Adaptive Reasoning and Intelligence Architecture, was a suite of enterprise AI tools built around a core insight that most of the industry had been slow to take seriously, that the failure mode of early generative AI in business contexts was not insufficient intelligence, but insufficient judgment, a failure to correctly assess which decisions were within the system's competence and which required human escalation. ARIA's differentiating feature was a proprietary uncertainty quantification layer that Sloane had built in collaboration with Chen and their lead researcher, Dr. Priya Subramaniam, which gave the system a calibrated, auditable confidence interval on every output, rather than the seamless false certainty that had caused so many early adopters to lose trust in AI tools entirely. She had been right. The timing had been right. Sterling AI was now valued at $2.4 billion, had 400 employees, had just signed a contract with the third largest financial services firm in the United States, and was 3 months from launching Area 3.0, which contained architectural improvements that Sloan believed, not as aspiration, but as a conclusion drawn from evidence, would change the competitive landscape of the enterprise AI sector in ways that would not be fully visible to anyone outside her company for at least 18 months. This was, by any reasonable measure, an extraordinary success. Sloan knew it was an extraordinary success. She felt about it with consistent and genuine satisfaction, the way she felt about any problem correctly and completely solved. She did not, as far as she was able to determine, feel anything else about it. This was fine. This was how it was supposed to work. She put on her jacket, checked that her phone was charged, verified that her driver had confirmed the departure time, and took the private elevator to the building's parking structure. The private elevator that served Sterling Towers executive suites descended directly to level B2, the portion of the underground parking structure that had been deeded to the building's 4 uppermost tenants as a condition of the original development deal. It was a clean, quiet space, not lavish in the way of truly expensive private garages, but functional and well-maintained in a way that reflected the building's management. Excellent lighting. 4,000K LEDs recessed into a white-painted ceiling. Smooth sealed concrete floors. A ventilation system that was not quite capable of handling the current ambient conditions, but was making a reasonable effort. There were 12 parking spaces on level B2. Only 4 were regularly occupied. Sterling AI held a lease on 3 of them, 2 of which contained company vehicles, and 1 of which held Sloan's personal car, a slate-gray Maserati Quattroporte, the most recent generation, which she had purchased not because she was particularly devoted to automotive aesthetics, but because it had achieved the highest combined score in a personal evaluation matrix that assessed safety ratings, interior noise levels at highway speed, climate control performance, and the duration of the factory warranty. That it was also, objectively, an extraordinarily beautiful car was a fact she acknowledged with something that was not quite indifference, more like the steady, low-register appreciation she maintained for things that were well-made and correct in their proportions, whether those things were algorithms or furniture, or the particular gray of pre-storm light over Lake Michigan. She pressed B2, straightened her jacket cuffs, and watched the floor indicator decline. She was reviewing, in the productive silence of the descent, the key points she intended to make in the quarterly review at Hargreave & Lew. The firm had been an early investor in Sterling AI, held a significant preferred equity stake, and its senior partners, particularly Thomas Hargreave, 71, who wore bow ties and had a habit of asking questions he already knew the answers to as a way of assessing whether the people across from him knew them too, had grown measurably more nervous in the last quarter as several of Sterling AI's larger competitors had made aggressive moves in the enterprise AI market. She had prepared a response to this nervousness. She had, in fact, prepared 3 separate versions of the response, calibrated to 3 possible conversational registers that Thomas Hargreave might bring to the meeting, and she had reviewed all 3 on the drive in this morning. She was not anxious about the meeting. Anxiety, in her experience, was a response to uncertainty, and she had reduced the uncertainty variables in this particular situation to a level that did not warrant it. The elevator settled, the doors opened. She stepped out into the garage. And then, approximately 4 seconds later, she stopped. Later, much later, in the slow reconstruction of memory that she would undertake with the same methodical approach she brought to everything else, Sloan would try to identify the precise sequence of sensory information that her brain had processed in those first 4 seconds, and she would find that it resisted sequence entirely. It had not arrived as a series of data points. It had arrived somehow, all at once, like a system receiving more simultaneous input than its architecture had been designed for, and responding by doing the closest thing it could to nothing. Simply stopping. The sound came first, maybe. Or maybe not first. Maybe simultaneously, inextricably. The sound of water. Not the controlled, efficient sounds of her daily environment. The HVAC cycling and the soft percussion of keyboards and the muted notification tones set to 22% volume. But water in full physical pressure, water doing work, the heavy, generous sweep of a hose across a metal surface that rang back with a high musical note. And underneath it, weaving through it, the tinny, distorted leak of music from earbuds. Something with a bass line and a bright edge. Something that moved. The smell. Water on hot concrete. The clean, sharp scent of detailing soap. A faint sweetness underneath that Sloane's brain took an extra moment to classify and finally presented as sunscreen. Or possibly something floral. Something alive in a space that normally smelled only of sealed concrete and tire rubber and the neutral industrial precision of climate-controlled air. And then, the visual information, which was where the sequence broke down entirely, where first and then stopped being categories her mind could apply. The figure at the car. She was perhaps 5'8", with a build that a different person, a less precise person, might have described as athletic in the vague and uncommitted way people use that word, but which Sloane's briefly functional observational machinery registered more specifically. The particular proportion of muscle and ease in someone for whom physical competence was not a project, but simply a condition. A body that worked and knew it, and was not making an announcement about it. She was wearing a white tank top, the kind that started the day white, and picked up the world as the hours went on. There was already a streak of blue-gray along one side, probably from a polish cloth. Cut-off shorts, dark denim, worn to a comfortable softness at the edges. Work boots, incongruously sturdy and precise amid everything else. Her skin was warm in the artificial light, a medium brown that caught the overhead LEDs and threw them back slightly differently than the concrete and metal around her did. Somehow warmer, somehow less fixed. Her hair was pulled up and back with the casual structural confidence of someone who understood her own hair without needing to think about it. Thick, dark, curling at the temples and the nape of the neck where the work and the physical effort were beginning to loosen what had been tucked away. The earbuds were in both ears. She had not heard the elevator. She was working on the front passenger panel of Sloane's Maserati with a microfiber cloth and an attitude of complete absorption. Not the performed absorption of someone conscious of being watched, but the real and private thing, the quality of attention that a person gives to a task when they believe themselves to be entirely alone. Her hips shifted slightly with the music that Sloane could hear, only as a faint, bright thread of sound. Her movements were unhurried and absolutely efficient. Long strokes that covered the maximum surface area per pass, a rotation at the wrist at the end of each stroke that lifted rather than dragged. A rhythm so economical and so exactly right that it was, Sloane realized distantly, beautiful in the specific way that any correctly executed physical process was beautiful. Not decorative, but inevitable. Not performing precision, but simply being it. Sloane Sterling, who had delivered keynote addresses at technology conferences to audiences of 3,000, without her heart rate rising above 68 beats per minute, who had looked Thomas Hargreave in his sharp old eyes and held his gaze through silences that made other people reach desperately for something to fill them, who had stood in front of the Sterling AI board of directors during the terrifying 10 months when everything had nearly gone wrong, and held the room with a quality of calm so complete that Marcus Chen had later told her it had been slightly eerie. Sloane Sterling stood in the doorway of her private parking space, on the way to a meeting she was fully prepared for, and could not move. She was not cold. The garage was warmer than her office, probably 75, maybe 76. A temperature that she would under normal circumstances have catalogued as mildly uncomfortable and dismissed. She did not dismiss it now. She felt it, with a strange precision, as warmth. The warmth of the sealed underground air, the warmth of the water evaporating from the Maserati's just-cleaned surfaces. Something warmer. Something was malfunctioning. This was the thought that arrived eventually, when thought resumed. Something is malfunctioning. It was a diagnostic frame, the only frame she had readily available, and it was not equal to the situation, but it was what she had, and she tried to apply it. What precisely was she experiencing? She ran a brief inventory. Her heart rate was elevated. Not alarmingly, but measurably, the kind of elevation she associated with taking the stairs quickly or being surprised from behind. She was not moving. She had intended to move. Had been. 3 seconds ago, in the middle of moving, traveling the short distance from elevator to car, with the automatic physical confidence of a person who has done the same motion thousands of times. And she was no longer moving. And the reason she was no longer moving was that her visual field was entirely occupied by a woman washing her car, and some process she did not have a clean technical term for had silently and without permission rerouted the standard executive processes of her mind into something that felt, disconcertingly, like a pause, like a buffering state, like a system encountering an input it had not been trained on and having to decide in real time what to do. She became aware, after a moment, that she was holding her phone. She did not remember taking it out of her jacket pocket. She did not know when she had done this, or why, and she was not looking at it, and she put it back. The woman at the car, who was, Sloane's mind supplied, with the delayed helpfulness of a processor finally catching up with its cue, a detailer, a professional, someone Gerald had presumably arranged, because the Maserati did not get this service from a random stranger, shifted her weight and reached for the hose that lay coiled on the concrete, and Sloane watched the smooth architecture of her shoulder and arm move through the reach with the same quality of helpless, suspended attention that she had been giving to everything else. And she thought, I cannot account for this. This was unusual. Sloane could, as a rule, account for things. She could account for her emotional states with a degree of precision that her therapist. She had seen a therapist for 3 years in her late 20s, found it useful, and maintained a quarterly check-in that felt appropriately calibrated, had once described as impressive and also slightly beside the point. She understood her own patterns. The satisfaction of problem solved, the particular irritation generated by avoidable inefficiency, the low-grade pleasure she took in her apartment in the early morning before the day's demands arrived, the strange and private tenderness she felt for Marcus, and for her mother and her brother, and for a small number of other people who had earned it over time. She understood these things, and she could label them, and she could make decisions about them with the same clarity she brought to everything else. She could not label what she was currently experiencing. She could identify its components: surprise, physical response, a cognitive disruption that was probably best classified as distraction. But the label for the combination of them, the word that would have allowed her to file it correctly and proceed to her car, was not available. The woman brought the hose around to the front of the car. The water hit the hood in a wide, clear arc. In the flat white overhead light of the garage, the water caught and scattered into something briefly, irreducibly beautiful. Not because water-catching light was rare, but because Sloane realized she had not been paying attention to water-catching light for a very long time, possibly years, possibly since she was a child, and her mother used to take her to the lake on summer mornings, and she would stand at the edge where the water moved over stones and watch the way it broke the light into things that couldn't be held. She inhaled, quietly, controlledly. The breath was almost entirely invisible, but it was a breath she had needed. June Thorne had been detailing cars in Chicago for 4 years. She had come to it sideways, the way she'd come to most things, through necessity and then through discovery. She'd grown up in Pilsen, in a household held together by her grandmother Marta and the rotating presence of various aunts and uncles and cousins, a household that was loud and Spanish on weekends, and crowded and warm in a way that made the apartments she'd lived in since feel, sometimes, like they were missing something structural. She had done art, paint mostly, large canvases that she'd had to abandon because they required space she'd never been able to reliably afford. And then she'd done other things. Restaurant work, a year studying graphic design, a period doing murals for a community organization in the neighborhood, a stint at a frame shop where she'd learned more about the relationship between color and surface and light than any class had taught her. The detailing had started when her cousin Beto offered her a job at the company he'd just started. Cash up front, flexible hours, and she had said yes because she needed the money and she'd found, within 2 weeks, that she was extraordinarily good at it, not just technically, though she was that, had a natural understanding of how products behaved on different surfaces, a patience with process that surprised people who met her because she didn't particularly seem patient in conversation, but perceptually. She could see what a surface needed. She could feel, through the cloth, where the paint had been stressed and where it was clean and whole, and she knew without quite knowing how she knew what each patch required. She had also discovered that she liked the solitude of it in a way she hadn't expected. She was social, genuinely social, the kind of person who left parties having spoken to everyone and having been genuinely interested in most of them. But she also had this other requirement, this need for stretches of time in which the world asked nothing complicated of her, in which her hands were occupied and her mind could go to the places it went when it wasn't being directly supervised. She thought, on the good days. She sketched in her head, planning pieces she would get to eventually, compositions that lived in her mind as vividly as if she'd already made them. She listened to music with a totality that wasn't possible in ordinary life, when the music was always competing with conversation and obligation. The garage at Sterling Tower was good for this. She'd been here 3 times before. Sterling AI had a contract with Beto's company, Pristine Auto, and the account was usually handled by Beto's other employee, a quiet man named Victor. But Victor had called in this morning with a fever, and she'd taken the job herself because she was available, and because the pay was good, and because, if she was being honest, she liked the strangeness of these places. The enormous underground rooms full of expensive quiet machinery, the quality of the light, the particular way sound moved in them. There was something like a gallery about them, she'd always thought. All that attention given to objects, all those beautiful, considered things. The Maserati was particularly satisfying. The paint was a slate gray, almost metallic, the kind of color that went 2 or 3 different ways depending on the angle of the light and the distance. And it was in excellent condition, clearly maintained, driven carefully, loved in the way that very expensive objects sometimes get loved, which was differently from the way humans got loved, but loved nonetheless. She'd started at the rear quarter panel, worked methodically forward, and was now at the front with the hose, doing the final rinse before the wax stage, and the music in her ears was a playlist she'd made in February and kept returning to all year, heavy on a specific kind of soul-adjacent thing that had a groove like something geological, like something that had been laid down slowly under pressure. She brought the hose around. She did not hear the elevator. She was not expecting anyone. The building's facilities management had given her a 3-hour window in which the B2 level would be unoccupied, which was, she'd gathered, longer than usual, and the result of some reshuffling of the day's schedule. She had 3 hours. The Maserati would take 90 minutes, maybe a little more if she decided to do the interior, which she probably would because the interior was interesting, and she wanted to see the materials up close. The water hit the hood in a wide, clear arc. She moved with the hose, following the water, watching the way the soap residue carried off and the paint emerged clean and precise underneath. And she was thinking about color, specifically about a piece she'd been planning for months that she could now see more completely than she'd been able to see it before. A large canvas in layers of gray and warm ochre, built up in translucent stages so that what looked gray from a distance opened into something much more complex up close. And she was so thoroughly inside this thought that the sound of a shoe on concrete registered not as an event, but simply as a note. Something added to the ambient texture of the space. And it was only when it stopped, when the sound stopped, and the absence of subsequent sound became present enough to be noticed, that some alert mechanism in her peripheral processing finally surfaced, and she turned. The woman standing at the elevator was wearing a charcoal suit. This was June Thorne's first data point, and it was delivered simultaneously with several others that she would later find it difficult to put in order. The stillness, primarily. The unusual, specific, almost complete stillness. Not the stillness of someone paused in the act of movement, phone in hand, distracted by a message, but the stillness of someone who had stopped at a deeper level than that, who was not doing anything except what her eyes were doing, which was looking. And then the quality of the looking, which June noticed because she was someone who paid attention to how people looked at things. It was a professional habit, and also simply a habit, because she had always been interested in attention, in where people directed it and what they did with it when it arrived. And this woman's quality of looking was something she had not seen before. Exactly. It was not a stare. A stare had aggression in it, or obliviousness. This had neither. It was... She would try to find the right word for it later. In the notebook she kept for observations and half-formed ideas and color notations, and overheard fragments that she hadn't figured out what to do with yet. Concentrated. Precise. Like a kind of light. June turned off the hose, pulled the earbuds out with a casual hand, looked back. "Hey," she said. Her voice was easy, unhurried. The voice of someone who had no particular reason to be embarrassed about being caught in the full presence of her own work. "Sorry, I didn't hear you come down. I've got about 40 minutes left. If you need the car sooner, I can..." She stopped. Not because she'd run out of words, but because something in the woman's face had shifted, almost imperceptibly, and she had caught it. A very small, very quick recalibration, like a mechanism adjusting. And then the woman, who was, June was now able to register more fully, quite striking, and apparently aware that she was somewhat caught in something, and not at all happy about this awareness, straightened slightly and said, in a voice with almost no temperature in it, "Take the time you need." A pause, during which June got the sense that something was happening behind those gray eyes that was not entirely under control, which was interesting. "The car," the woman added, as if this required specification. "Take the time you need with the car." "Okay," June said. She held the eye contact for a beat longer than necessary. She did this sometimes, not aggressively, just as a way of testing the texture of a situation. And then she lifted one side of her mouth and turned back to the car. Behind her, she could hear the sound of heels on concrete, stopping again after 2 steps, resuming after a moment, finally arriving with a click and settle at the car's left rear panel, a respectful distance from where June was working. She reinserted one earbud, left the other out. After a moment, she heard the woman say from behind her, "You're doing it dry." June looked over her shoulder. The woman was standing with her hands in her jacket pockets, a containment gesture, June noted, and looking at the section of paint June had just finished, which was the rear driver's panel, still slightly damp, but drying fast in the warm air. "Not completely," June said. "I use a low moisture technique for the final polish. The surface stays more consistent, less streaking." A silence. "What product?" The woman's voice had changed slightly. Some register she seemed more comfortable in had come online, technical, focused, somewhat less like she was managing something. "Menzerna 3000, and a polishing compound from a brand called Guyon for the base coat. But mostly it's the cloth and the pressure. Products matter less than people think." Another silence, slightly longer than the first. "That's true in software too," the woman said. June glanced back again. The woman was looking at the car with her head slightly tilted, at an angle June recognized as the angle of someone trying to see something, genuinely. Not performing interest, but having it. The quality of attention had shifted slightly from whatever the earlier version of it had been. Or rather, it was the same quality, June thought. But it had found a more socially acceptable channel, something this woman was more comfortable expressing than whatever she'd been expressing before. "I'm June," June said. "Thorne, Pristine Auto." "Sloane Sterling," the woman said. And then, as if remembering something, "This is my car." June looked at the car, then back at Sloane Sterling. "I know," she said. The next 40 minutes were strange, not uncomfortable. June Thorne had a high tolerance for strangeness, and a genuine curiosity about people that made most social textures workable for her. And she was, if she was being accurate, somewhat more interested in this particular strangeness than in the straightforward version of the job would have been. But strange, in the way that something is strange, when it contains a tension that neither party is naming, and both parties are aware that neither is naming it. Sloane Sterling did not leave. She had somewhere to be. She had said this once, briefly, checking her phone within the first 5 minutes, and then putting it back with the decisive motion of someone overriding a decision they'd already made. And she did not leave. She stood, then sat on the hood of one of the company's other vehicles. This required a visible internal negotiation. June watched her decide it was acceptable, and then execute it with slightly too much precision, settling onto the car's surface with the careful deliberateness of someone who did not, historically, sit on cars. And she watched June work, and occasionally she asked a question. The questions were technical at first. The chemistry of Polish compounds, the relationship between surface temperature and product efficacy. An interesting topic, it turned out, because the heat coming down from the city above was affecting the concrete temperature, and therefore the paint temperature, and therefore the working window on certain products. June knew these things because she'd learned them through years of practical experience, and because she was constitutionally the kind of person who wanted to understand mechanisms, not just outcomes. Sloane Sterling clearly understood mechanisms. She was not asking questions to fill space. She was asking questions to arrive at something, moving through the information with a focused efficiency that June found, against expectation, engaging. And then, gradually, the questions changed, or didn't change so much as expand, moving from the strictly technical into something with more room in it. How long have you been doing this? 4 years, more or less. Before that? Other things. Art, mostly. Some restaurant work. A frame shop. A pause. Do you still make art? June worked the cloth in long strokes down the hood. Yes, she said. Just not as big as I want to yet. The silence that followed this was not dismissive. It was the silence of someone receiving information and filing it with care. And June, who had spent enough time around people who received information about her art, with the polite blankness of those who did not find it relevant, noticed the difference. What kind? Sloane asked. Paint, mostly. Large scale when I can manage it. She glanced back. Abstract, but not in the way people usually mean that. More like visible process. You can see what the painting went through to get to where it is. Sloane was looking at her steadily. Stratigraphic, she said. June paused. Yeah, she said. Exactly. Exactly that. Something shifted between them, very slightly, in the way that it sometimes does when an unexpected precision arrives in a conversation, when someone finds the right word for a thing you'd been circling, and the word lands and the territory becomes suddenly clearer. June felt it. She was fairly certain Sloane felt it too, though Sloane's expression underwent only the most minimal of changes, the faintest easing, something that was almost but not quite what another face would have expressed as warmth. June finished the hood, stepped back, checked the angles. Done, she said. Sloane got off the car, the motion, this time, slightly less deliberate, and came to stand beside her, looking at the Maserati. The paint was at its best now, the gray going clean and deep and slightly luminous in the garage light, the surface so fine it looked less like paint than like something continuous and whole. You were right about the technique, Sloane said. There's no streaking. I know, June said. A pause. You said that before, Sloane observed. I did, June agreed. And there it was again, that faint almost something in Sloane's expression, the flicker of something that was not quite a smile, but was clearly that impulse at its most contained and careful stage. June was stripping her gloves off, repacking the supply kit, running through the mental checklist of the job completed. She should leave. She had 2 other jobs this afternoon, though only one of them was actually time-sensitive, and she was ahead of schedule, and she should collect the payment confirmation from the building's facilities contact and go. She was doing all the necessary preliminary motions of leaving when Sloane said, behind her, in a tone she had not used yet, not the management voice, not the technical inquiry voice, but something slightly uncertain, very slightly less than the precision she'd maintained for the past 40 minutes. You said your work is large-scale when you can manage it. June paused in her repacking. Yeah. What prevents you from working at the scale you want? She looked up. Sloane was looking at her directly, had turned fully to face her, which June noticed because it was a physical commitment, a statement of full attention, and the question was not small talk, or June would not have answered it as she did. Space, she said. Money for materials at scale. Time, sometimes, but mostly space and money. Sloane received this the way she'd received everything, with a focused stillness, something processing. The art, she said. The visible process. The layers. She paused. You could apply that kind of perception to interface design. June looked at her. I'm sorry? Interface. User-facing design for software. Specifically. And something happened here that June found very interesting. Sloane's eyes went briefly away, to the middle distance, and then came back. Specifically, I'm building a product whose user interface is technically correct, but experientially wrong. The team that designed it is very good at architecture and very poor at what you described. Visible process. How something feels to move through. Another pause. I've been looking for a kind of perception that my engineers don't have. June was quiet for a moment. She had been, in her experience, the recipient of a number of propositions inside parking garages, and they were never usually phrased like this. Are you offering me a job? She said. I think I am, Sloane said. This was not the tone of someone who had said this before. It was, June thought, the tone of someone who had said this for the first time, and was slightly surprised to find themselves saying it. I detail cars, June said. You perceive surfaces, Sloane said. You understand the relationship between process and result. You work with your hands, but you are clearly thinking at a different level than the immediate task. And you know what stratigraphic means, which most people I hire do not. June looked at her for a long, slow moment. What would the job actually be? Aesthetic consultant, Sloane said, for the new product's interface. Approximately. Another brief, interesting flicker of something. Another micro-adjustment. 40 hours a week, starting next Monday. The pay... She named a figure. June was careful not to change her expression. The figure was more than she made in a month at Pristine Auto. I don't know anything about software interface design, she said. I have people who know about software, Sloane said. I need someone who knows about perception. The garage was very quiet. The water June had used had run to the drain at the center of the concrete floor and was gone. The Maserati was perfect. Above them, through 17 floors of steel and glass and managed air, the city was burning in a heat that neither of them, in this climate-controlled underground with its humming ventilation and its excellent lighting, could quite feel. June Thorne looked at the gray paint she had just brought to its best version of itself, and then she looked at the woman who was not quite managing to look like she wasn't waiting for an answer. And she thought, with the part of herself that had always been willing, when the situation warranted, to accept an interesting detour. Why not? Monday, she said. Something in Sloane's face settled, slightly. Not relief, exactly. More like the smooth resolution of a calculation. Monday, Sloane confirmed. And then, very quietly, as if checking it. Good. She turned toward the elevator. She was, June noted, already walking with the deliberate purpose of someone getting back inside their own authority, reclaiming the register they were most at home in, putting distance between themselves and the last 40 minutes. "Ms. Sterling," June called. Sloane turned. "You're going to be late," June said. "For wherever you were going?" A pause. "Yes," Sloane said. She said it like it surprised her. And then she got in the elevator and the doors closed, and June stood alone in the garage with the clean gray car and the smell of soap and water and the specific, interesting quality of a silence that comes after something has been set in motion. She put both earbuds back in, smiled at nothing, started repacking. The elevator returned Sloane to her floor. She walked back to her office with the same controlled pace she used for everything, set her phone on the desk, looked at the 7 screens, and stood very still for approximately 90 seconds. She was late. Hargreave and Lou would be managed. She had texted her driver with precise instructions, and she would arrive at 11:47 rather than 11:30. And the meeting's substance would not be affected because her arguments were correct, regardless of the minute she delivered them. And Thomas Hargreave, for all his bow-tied theatrics, understood the difference between a tardy executive and a wrong one. She looked at the screens. The market data ran in its steady amber columns. Area's usage analytics showed a morning spike, normal. The server room was fine. The news aggregator had flagged 2 items, neither urgent. The project dashboard was as it had been an hour ago. On the 7th screen, the smallest one, Area's alert stream scrolled its steady patient text. She had been, she calculated, 43 minutes late to her own departure. 43 minutes in which she had stood still in a parking garage and then sat on a company vehicle. She registered the absurdity of this with a brief, private wince, and asked questions about Polish compounds and watched water on paint, and offered a job she had not planned to offer to a woman she had met 6 minutes earlier. She turned this over. Applied the same methodical inventory she applied to everything. She had needed something. This much was empirically clear. She had needed something that her current team did not have, and she had identified it, and she had acted on that identification. This was not irrational. This was, in fact, exactly how good hiring decisions were supposed to work. Not from a job description that already knew what it needed, but from a genuine gap precisely identified. The interface problem was real. It had been real for months, and Dr. Subramaniam had raised it in the last product review, and Sloane had put it on the list, and it had not moved up the list because she had not found the right kind of answer for it, the kind that wasn't just technically competent but somehow felt right. And she stopped this line of reasoning. Let it settle. It was fine. It was a reasonable decision. What it was not. She was very clear on this, with a firmness she applied more deliberately than the occasion would usually have required. What it was not was personal. She had been briefly disrupted by an unexpected stimulus in a controlled environment. She had experienced some variety of attentional fixation that was probably explained by novelty, and by the accumulated cognitive load of a particularly demanding quarter, the body and mind's tendency, under sustained high-stakes pressure, to respond to irrelevant stimuli with disproportionate intensity. This was documented. This was normal. This was not information about anything except her current stress levels, which were, she would admit in the privacy of her own inventory, higher than she would have preferred. She had made a practical decision based on a genuine professional need. Monday, June. Thorne would come to Sterling AI. She would be useful. She had an interesting mind. This was not sentiment. It was an assessment. And the perception she demonstrated in the garage was real and rare, and had nothing to do with the other things, the things Sloane was not examining, that she was placing firmly in the category of temporary anomaly and leaving there. She picked up her jacket, checked her watch, walked to the elevator. Below her, Chicago burned. She did not feel it. She told herself she did not feel it. The elevator doors closed. Later that evening, after the meeting, which had gone well, Thomas Hargreave's questions had been the second variant, and she'd been prepared for them, and she had left the room having restored the confidence that the quarter's noise had eroded. after the drive back through streets that shimmered with the day's accumulated heat, after the 12-floor ride to her apartment in Lincoln Park, where the temperature was maintained at, she noted it. Tonight, with a flicker of something she was not prepared to classify. 18 degrees Celsius, Sloane Sterling stood in her kitchen and drank a glass of water that was slightly too cold and looked out at the lake. She had made a hire today, an unusual one, possibly brilliant. She had been late to a meeting, which was not her practice, and she had managed it. She had done these things because she had been briefly and inexplicably stopped by the sight of a woman in a white tank top doing a job extremely well, and instead of getting in her car and driving away as her schedule had indicated, she had done something else. She was not prepared to think carefully about what that something else meant. She would think about the interface problem. She would think about what the role could productively contain. She would prepare, as she prepared for everything, a clear set of objectives and a reasonable framework for evaluating whether the arrangement was working. She would not think about the way the water had caught the light. She looked at the lake. The heat haze had softened the far shore to an impression, a dark suggestion at the edge of the water, the boundary between what could be seen and what could only be imagined. The sky above it was the first deep blue of the evening, something edging toward color after the day's long monochrome pressure. It was beautiful, she supposed. It was the kind of beauty she usually filed and moved on from. Tonight, she stayed at the window for 17 minutes. She did not know why. She went to bed at 10:43, which was her scheduled time. She did not sleep well. In the morning, she sent a detailed email to her HR director, outlining the role, the compensation structure, the reporting hierarchy, and a set of initial objectives. The email was precise and complete, and contained no information that could not have been written by someone who had made a purely professional decision. She read it twice. She sent it. She looked at the calendar. Monday.